So in other words, it's privacy in the design rather than privacy by design. What do you think, Mr. GEFFRAY? And we want to hear, of course, about the CNIL view on privacy and ethics in
Just in 2 words. The first one is that the English expression privacy by design is not totally relevant. It is personal data protection by design, not privacy. And personal data protection is wider than privacy, as everybody knows now. The second one is that we have to combine privacy by design and privacy by default. And I'm agree with my neighbor, because privacy by design alone has technically not a lot of sense. But if you speak about privacy by design, you speak about processes. You should be accountable about the fact that you have integrate the data protection when you have conceived your service or product. But cumulated with privacy by default, it means that you should have the best parameters in order to protect personal data and privacy. So I think that these 2 principles must be taken together in order to understand the balance of the GDPR.
Very important what you said, because this is a commitment that, you know, it's more achievable, which is the security. You know, the importance of keeping this large amount of very personal and critical data secure, which I think is something that we could achieve in easier way than these other things that are in order to be compliant with the GDPR.
Okay. Well, so Mr. GEFFRAY, you wanted to share with us, and of course it's relevant to the discussion, the CNIL's view and work in relation to ethics and privacy, and in the context of data analytics.
Thank you. So I'm Edouard GEFFRAY, the Secretary General of the CNIL, which means the head of the services under the executive presidency of the chairwoman, Isabelle Falk-Pierrotin. The CNIL is competent for a wide range of missions on the whole life cycle of processing. Just to give you an idea, an overview, information. We receive something like 160,000 calls per year at our legal hotline, just to give you an idea. With respect to the upstream control, we receive declarations and we deliver authorizations for processing of sensitive data, for example. We answer thousands and thousands of requests of advice. And of course, we have a downstream control too, with something like 8,000 complaints per year, 500 controls, 100 enforcement notifications, and something like between 10 and 20 sanctions. So given that, as a regulator, we want to reconcile innovation, public order, considerations, and of course, personal data protection. We are facing several key issues. The first one is, of course, that the digital revolution has changed the role of personal data. The personal data is not only the oil, you know this expression, the oil of the digital economy, etc. This isn't the oil, this is the Higgs boson of the digital economy. And, it has changed both the way the companies are processing data and our job. Because the question is no longer, as it was in 1978, when the CNIL was created in France, to know if my processing is legal by design or in design. It is to know if I am compliant during the whole life of my processing. It is to know whether I provide optimal protection of my data at any time. And that's why, as a regulator, our job has changed. Because, historically speaking, we were just at the beginning of the processing through declaration and authorizations. Now our job is to accompany companies or public administration during the whole life of their processing, both through advices, and control. The second key issue, second revolution, is of course the legal one with the adoption of the GDPR. We have said a word about that. But it is very important in the European culture because we have the same text. It is a regulation, it is not a directive. So we have the same text. And we will take the term, the exact legal terms are jointly approved decisions each time we will face transnational processing. So we will be able to give, legally speaking, a high security to companies, to international companies, but we will be able to take only one decision applicable on the whole territory of the European Union. And this is the first time that in the regulation of personal data we have such an integration between the different CNIL or DPAs. The third key issue is of course the question of territoriality. We could make theses about that, but just to be very simple and clear, the question is how to have a territorial regulation of something which is presented as a deterritorialized phenomena. And it implies a kind of a legal imagination to find the good answers. The fourth key issue is how to empower individuals in the digital age. The right to portability, which means the right to obtain a copy of your personal data and to be free to reuse it with any other product or services, is one of the key points of the regulation of the GDPR and one of the key points of this empowered individual. I believe that we entered the age of the empowered individual. And the last one, last key issue, of course, is the question of security, and in particular cyber security. We are competent to control controllers and processors and to ensure that the security and confidentiality of personal data is respected. To give you an idea, you understand that everything is linked. And to give you an idea, 85% of the controls made by the CNIL involve cyber security issues about HTTPS protocols, about cryptography, about passwords, etc. We are not at the good level in terms of cyber security. So, in all that, we have a common principle, of course, which is that the person is the center of gravity of our legal and philosophical system, at least in Europe. And to build this frame of confidence and regulation, to build a sustainable digital economy, we need to combine three dimensions: the legal one, which is the historical one; the technological one, to give you an idea, 20% of the staff of the CNIL is composed by technological experts or engineers; and last but not least, the ethical one. And that's why the recent Digital Republic law, promulgated in October 2016, has assigned to the CNIL a new mission, which is the mission to lead, I give you the right word, to lead a reflection on the ethical and social matters raised by the rapid development of digital technologies. And we have defined two key points. The first one, of course, is the first theme, algorithm and artificial intelligence, for this year. And the second one is the method. The method is to have a wide national public debate led by the CNIL, but implicating a lot of partners. I think that the Conseil National des Barreaux could be a very good partner. Au passage. Short page of advertisement. And we have launched this debate at the beginning of January. Just perhaps to finish with that, to give you just a first focus on the questions raised by this debate about algorithms and artificial intelligence. The key point is the autonomy of the individual in a world of algorithms. This individual can be the object or the subject of the decision. It can be the author of the decision. Just to give you some of the questions that were raised during the first day of reflection, can algorithms improve decision making without putting any at risk the autonomy or the responsibility of the man using them? We have exchanged about predictive analytics in the justice systems, and about the fact that algorithm can crystallize the bias of the human beings, where human beings try to correct their own bias. Second example, second question: which flexibility should we leave to an algorithm? What will decide an algorithm which accompanies, for example, an elderly person, if it is programmed so that he or she must not suffer? Will the algorithm decide to kill her or to kill him because he must not suffer? In another field, for example, the cultural one, we have further question to know if the algorithm really keep us apart from pluralist contents and point of view, and if it's problematic, etc. So we have launched a lot of questions. We have a lot of partners which will deeply think about these different questions. But you see that today, in the digital age, and this is both my conviction and the conviction of the CNIL, we have to combine the legal, the technological, and the ethical dimensions of the regulation if we want to build a frame of confidence, which means a sustainable digital economy and society. Thank you.
So a question for you, Mr. GEFFRAY. The data subject, your mission as a regulatory body, of course, is to help provide the protection. But do you see a specific role and the communication in that respect toward data subjects themselves? That things that they need to do to be more aware of what they have to do to ensure this protection?
With the GDPR and with the current law, individuals have already a lot of rights. And these rights don't depend, for example, of the property of personal data. Because the data is personal, because the data is related to my person, I have rights, access, and tomorrow portability. The fact is that we need to empower individuals by making them aware of their rights. And this is very hard to reach the right scale in this field, in particular with our limited means. So we are facing a challenge. I think we have a good regulation. A good regulation, I mean a good GDPR, because regulation, of course, in English, as everybody knows, both the text and the regulation. So we have a good text. We have, I think, a good frame of regulation by the DPAs. We need to effectively empower individuals through an appropriate communication. But it is harder than all the precedent steps.
So if I hear you well, you are saying that a data subject has a right to protection of his or her personal data, but at the same time you mentioning this notion of right of property, which from a legal standpoint would be ownership, and I think it's a different legal concept: protection, right to protection, and ownership of personal data. Are you saying that the new regulation has created a new legal concept of ownership of one's own data? Because I don't think that's And if it was the case, of course, that would be the legal ground for this right to portability, which is going to raise a lot of practical questions in terms of implementation. But it does, just to finish the idea, when we had the debate about consumer protection, and the way consumers provide all this data, and including non-personal data, by the way, and this is being actually used for commercial purpose, of course, by the various commercial actors and businesses. Does this create a right to trade your personal data and to get remuneration?
The idea was to say that when the GDPR was in the phase of negotiations, there was very big debates about this question of ownership of personal data. And some people have said that this was the right solution. You know, if you are the owner, you can do everything you want, etc., etc. And we were at the CNIL really against such an evolution, like the Council of State in France, because the rights you have in your data don't depend on this question of ownership, because you know it is nearly ontological. Because the data is personal, you have rights on your data. Even if it is the GAFA, the nature, even if it's somewhere all over the world, etc., you have personal rights because the data is related to you. And this is a very, very strong legal frame in the digital age. And certainly I think the most relevant. Because the protection doesn't depend on the territory you live, etc., but follows the data everywhere it goes.
Just to make a comment on that, I think it's you can make a parallel with your body. I mean, it's like we don't have to get a right to be owner of our body because it's us. And I think it's a parallel we can do because we're probably more familiar with those type of issues which are not very new.
Yeah, when you link it back to the point that Yves Alexandre has made about how personal data being anonymized or pseudonymized can still link to you, then it goes actually beyond the right of protection to personal data. What we're talking about is a right not to be identified. It's really the right of privacy, or isn't it?
I wouldn't say it's the right. There is no right to be not to be identified. But the fact is that if you want to be out of the field of the GDPR, so if you want to be out of the field of the data protection law, the only way is to anonymize data. While the data are pseudonymized, for example, you are still under the regulation, in the field of the regulation. So I wouldn't say that you have a right to not be to see that your data are not re-identifiable, but the only consequence is that you cannot invoke the fact that you have pseudonymized data in order to avoid the application of the regulation.